Welcome to Heartbeat, the Highlands Ranch podcast. Heartbeat is brought to you by Friedel & Associates, a heart-centered real estate company with 25 years experience in helping you find your place. I'm your host, Jake Friedel. Today I sit down with my good friend Dave Boyd, who is the co-founder of Man Uncivilized, a men's work company, which is incredible. And I'm so lit up about what he's doing, and I'm a part of what he's doing. I'm so blessed to be leading a men's group under the umbrella of Man Uncivilized. I cannot wait to share with you all the things he's doing to make the world a better place, starting with men. And as we grow together and be better men together, and we be better to women and to children and to all of the people of the world together. So enjoy the interview, and I hope you learn something new about men's work. Dave, welcome to Heartbeat. Thanks so much for being here, man.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation, man. I'm really excited to share a little bit more about myself and my organization with the men and women of Highlands Ranch.
Awesome. Yeah, me too. I'm excited to be partnering up with you for our men's group, and super excited for what you guys are up to in the world. So yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself first. How'd you end up in Colorado? That kind of thing, your family.
Yeah, definitely. So been married for 16 years. 2 kids, 11 and 6. We live down in Parker. And before that, I came from North Carolina. I was in North Carolina since high school, joined the military, went off, to Afghanistan for a while, came back to the North Carolina. My wife and I met, stayed there for quite a long time. And then I came out here for a work conference in 2018. And we were staying at the Gaylord out in Aurora, like right after it was built. And I was there for the conference, and Thursday afternoon, I just missed the entire afternoon session after lunch because I was just sucked in by the mountains, standing out there in the field in Eastern Aurora. And I called my wife that afternoon. I was like, hey, I don't know when or how, but we're moving to Colorado eventually. And we came out here a couple of years later, stayed in downtown Golden, and I won her over. And so, almost 2 years ago now, we moved out to Parker and been super happy ever since. Really, really loving the Colorado lifestyle and mountain biking, snowboarding, hiking, all the, stereotypical transplant to Colorado kind of activities.
Overrunning our mountains.
Yes. Indeed.
It's great to have you here. But tell me about you and your background.
Yeah. So, after high school, right out of high school, went into the military, joined the Marine Corps, to go see the world and, take a trip overseas to Iraq or Afghanistan. And, in the Marine Corps, you can do 3 options at the end of your training. You can do East Coast, West Coast, or overseas. And I put overseas, West Coast, East Coast, and then they stationed me 2 hours away from home. And so I didn't get my grand adventure, if you will, that a lot of guys get when they join the military, other than my time in Afghanistan. And I joined to stay in forever. My goal is to be a lifer. And after I got home, I got hurt in a training accident. Had a couple of major knee reconstructions after that, which kind of ended my active duty career. I was in the reserves for a couple of years. During that time, I was also a 911 dispatcher back east in Raleigh, North Carolina. I did that for a bit and developed a different kind of passion for service, and went into law enforcement for about a decade and change, in the Raleigh area, and did everything from, gang and drug work and chasing down violent criminals and bad guys and all that kind of stuff to, transitioning into community policing for a few years, which is where I really kind of found my stride, I think, because I got to make more of that human connection with people and find ways to support them, and other than hey, let's take the bad guys to jail. There was a lot more opportunity for connecting people in need with resources and opportunities to help them grow as people and to help the community in a different way. Spent some time on the SWAT team, spent a couple of years as a school resource officer, and then transitioned into the nonprofit world for a few years, working for a veterans organization that train veterans and families of the fallen to mentor youth in our schools and communities. And all the while in the background since 2018, been really working on myself and working on helping other men find opportunities to develop themselves and build opportunities for men to connect in community and those kinds of things with my company, Man Uncivilized.
So Dave, you're one of the founders of Man Uncivilized.
Yeah.
Tell us, why did you start this company, and how did your background lead you to this?
That's a really good question. I think that a lot of people, myself included, to get into self-development work or into men's work or into therapy, into counseling, into nonprofit work, all these kind of fields. We all have something in our past that we're working to heal ourselves, and we find some healing, and then we want to share that with the world in some way. And because of my past in the military and law enforcement and 911 and, even my childhood, I wouldn't say a super tumultuous relationship with men, but, it was, I had more female friends, probably is the best way to say it, growing up. And then as I got into this men's work, this idea of men's work, it was like, oh man, like men need men. Like I need more men in my life. I need more men to support me, to celebrate me, to hold me accountable, to help me grow. And, after I had that realization and, started my journey in men's work, I decided that there's lots more me's out there, so, around the world, and men need opportunities to connect with other men. There's a lot of research out there right now, about the male friendship recession. And I think that, long before we started talking about that, I was feeling the effects of it. And I talk to men every week from around the world, not just here in Douglas County or in Denver. I talk to them all around the world, and I hear the same things. Like, I need to find more men in my life. Like, how do I find more men who are, want to talk about life, that don't want to just talk about football, that don't just want to, drink beer or take shots or, not that there's anything wrong with those kinds of relationships. I think we need those too, but there's so much more to relationship between men than I think the vast majority of us have been taught or shown, as we've grown up. So, my personal background, my experiences, has really driven a lot of what we do. And obviously, our founder, Trevor Boehm, as well, his experiences drives what we do. And then we keep learning, and we keep, the old saying, you build the airplane as you fly it, like when we find new things that men need or want, we try to build opportunities for that and get men together to support each other, celebrate each other, to hold each other accountable, to grow and heal, in the ways that we need to, specifically as men.
It's funny. I have a similar story about how I kind of got into men's work myself. I never felt at home with men. I feel like after about sixth grade, I had my group of, boys that I hung out with. And then I had a traumatic break from that group. And from then on until into my 20s, I didn't feel like I belonged with men. I felt like I was a little weird and I was out of step. And I thought, there's something wrong with men, and I just do better with women.
Yeah.
And then I kind of further developed and was like, I need good men in my life. And then I further developed and thought like, no, men are kind of broken and we need each other, and we're going to lift each other up. So that was kind of my impetus for starting my first men's group. So really cool to hear that overlap.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot more men out there that probably have this, that are in our position, that are helping run men's organizations and men's group that have a very similar experience with men. Like, so many of us just don't feel safe around other men, and whether that was from bullying or bad experiences with sports or being, leaving a friend group, I think there's a lot of similarities that we don't hear about because a lot of men don't talk about those kinds of things growing up.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. I was going to save this question until we got a little deeper, but we're right here. So one of the tenets of Uncivilized is our greatest gifts grow in the garden of our wounds. Do you mind sharing like maybe what that garden looks like for you and that this whole movement is growing out of?
Yeah, definitely. I've had a lot of traumatic experiences in my life, whether it was in the the military or in law enforcement or 911 or, my childhood, facing adversity, losing a parent when I was younger. My dad died while I was in high school. Had some abuse, neglect issues when I was, very, very young and before my parents split. The obviously war in the military is traumatizing all by itself. And, all of these traumatic incidents, if you will, or traumatic experiences have been planting seeds in that garden for such a long time. And it took until, I wouldn't say I hit rock bottom, but I was definitely in a not in the best place, right? Like I was drinking a lot. I wouldn't say I was an alcoholic, but I was drinking, 3 to 5 beers a day after I come home from work, that kind of thing, checking out the video games, checking out on social media, like not present with my kids, not present with my wife. And then I ran into my ex-wife, in a Walmart parking lot, and like all sorts of stuff that I hadn't dealt with, from our divorce and our relationship just came flooding back to me. And that was in 2017 or 2016, 2017. And, I kind of turned into a pretty big jerk for a while. And my now wife, it was like, hey man, like, let's get it together. Let's get you some help if you need it. Let's, help you heal. And through that process of my own healing, I was like, oh, I have more to offer the world than taking bad guys to jail. I have more, my story can help other people. A good friend of mine, Jeremy Goldberg, said that, like, told me a long time ago that, like, if you don't share your story and it could help someone and it keeps that person in like a suffering moment, like, it's kind of cruel on your part to withhold your story. And so, I started speaking out. I started sharing my journey. I started teaching from my experiences, from, my wounds or the seeds that were planted in my garden, and they just continued to grow larger. When I think about storytelling and the impact that storytelling can have on other people, like, like maybe somebody else is like just starting to tend to their garden, but they can sit in my garden for a little while and maybe sit in the shade, from the plants that have grown in mine from my experiences. And so there's been a lot, to sum up all of that. There's been a lot of rough experiences in my life that have brought me to where I am, that have made me so much more heavily focused on relationship and being able to be present and to be truly in contact with somebody rather than checked out all the time when, the head nods and the, no, that kind of thing. And like, this is a perfect example of being able to really sit down and have a deep, honest, open, vulnerable conversation with somebody else.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And like, let's be real. You probably wouldn't be married if you were continuing down that path.
Probably not.
That's the path so many men go down on, is like, things get hard. We don't express them. We find a vice and we just go to it, whether it's, booze, weed, porn, like whatever.
Yeah.
Just tanks our marriages, tanks our relationships. So good on you for bringing that to the world.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
There's, if we think about like the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, dissociate responses, that our nervous system has, I think, a lot of people think about men and we think about the fight response, right? Like, we can be power hungry, we can be abusive, we can be all of these other negative things. But I think so many men don't realize how much more they flee from situations through the things that you talked about, through the numbing, through porn, alcohol, drugs, cell phone addiction, video games, you name it, rather than like, hey, I'm going to sit in this for a minute and I'm going to try to understand like what's coming up and how. But we're also not taught how to do those things as young men. We're taught, the old 50s Marlboro man, is still alive and well in a lot of families, and just push it down. Don't deal with it, cover it up. Don't talk about it. Don't feel it, and move on to the next hard thing that you then need to stuff down on top of it. And then it comes out sideways through all of those other, vices that we talked about.
Yeah. I love this conversation that Uncivilized has come up with about the Marlboro man, and then the sort of reaction to the Marlboro Man, which was me in my younger life, was the sensitive new age nice guy who manipulates in order to get what he wants and can't speak what he wants. And they're both just nasty underneath, and they just are both very unexpressed, unhappy men. And it's so easy to fall into one of those things.
Yeah. And, like it's easy when we look at, like when I talk to a coaching client, or I talk to a guy that's part of a men's group, whether it's in Canada or Australia or Europe or here in Denver, and it's like, yeah, you fall into the 50s Marlboro Man guy, or you fall into the sensitive new age guy. But it really comes back to the fact that we haven't had the opportunity. We haven't had the training. Haven't had the mentorship and the eldership to develop the skill sets that allow us to survive and to thrive in a healthy way versus all the negative ways we already talked about. And, ultimately what I think a lot of people don't understand or recognize is that all of those different behaviors are a protective factor for something. Like your brain and your nervous system is trying to protect you from something. And so you act in this certain way. And that's not to excuse, negative behavior and, addiction and all of those kinds of things. But all of those responses are protective. They're trying to keep you safe from something that you might not have the skill set or the capabilities at the moment to process or to deal with or to integrate. I think about my own journey, like at 21, when I came home from Afghanistan and my ex-wife had an affair with my ex-best friend. And it's like, at 21, nobody taught me how to deal with that. Nobody taught me how to deal with the trauma of war. And so it was like, okay, well, I'm just going to start drinking.
Just numb it out. Yeah.
Not deal with it. If I can deal with it, that can be a 5, 8, 10 year down the road David problem. It doesn't need to be a 21-year-old David problem by any means.
Let's dive in a little more about Man Uncivilized. So tell me a little bit about the company. Tell me about what it means to be uncivilized and why that is the name.
Yeah, definitely. So our mission at Uncivilized is to end the unnecessary suffering in men so that we can end the suffering that's caused by men through all of those things that we've talked about already. We have a lot of different opportunities. Our goal is to try to meet men where they are, wherever they are on their journey. We have men that come to our programs who have, they got a Facebook ad because we paid for a Facebook ad to, bring people into our organization, and they've never even heard of men's work. And we've got guys that are in an organization who have been in men's work for 30, 40, 50 years at this point, who are part of our, our elder council, who help provide knowledge and wisdom and experience and guidance to the next generation of men and leaders that are coming up in the world. But I think our primary offering, or our primary opportunity for men to engage with, is what we call the Uncivilized Nation. And that's our international online and in-person men's community. And we have men in all over the world who have been through our programs, guys from India or South Africa or Australia or New Zealand or Canada, a bunch right here in Denver. This is kind of our home base here in the Front Range. But we do the community aspect of it. We have monthly challenges, lots of calls, coaching for men. We bring in a therapist, one of our elders, Dewey Freeman. He's been if you've ever been in therapy in Colorado, you've probably worked with a therapist who was trained by Dewey. He's been in private practice here for 50 plus years. He's done so much work around attachment systems and developmental models for children and how they impact our relationships as adults. But he's also trained almost every therapist in Colorado at some point, and trained people from all around the world. And so he's, him and our chief mystic, is also a therapist and a student of Dewey's, Michael Gay, who's been a therapist in private practice here in Colorado for over a decade now. They set a very strong therapeutic foundation for what we do, whether it's our online community or it's a workshop or it's a men's group or it's our monthly challenges. Like, everything we do has a therapeutic foundation to it. We're not just like, throwing some Post-it notes up on the wall and throwing darts at them and, hey, we're going to do that next year, next month for our monthly challenge. We really spend a lot of time developing our programming and in a way that will allow men to work with it internally and then have an opportunity to express it externally. I said a lot there. Any follow-up questions are always welcome, man.
Yeah.
I talk about it every day.
That was great. Why uncivilized? I said this name to somebody, to a woman the other day, and I was like, I'm in this group called Uncivilized. And she said, that's terrifying. That sounds like what men already are. And I was like, no.
Yeah, definitely. So the name actually came about by accident. There was never like a planned thing. It was like Traver was living in Brooklyn, living with a good friend of his who's a professional trainer for NBA players. Like he just kind of stays on standby for, NFL or NBA players to go train when they're in town. They don't even have to like be in New York City. And so they were living in this like Spartan-esque apartment, like mattresses on the floor, cinder block bookshelves and that kind of stuff. No TV, no fast food, any of that kind of stuff. Waking up at 5 a.m. to go to the gym downstairs and train with each other, having real conversations, that kind of thing. And Traver went to host his first men's group and one guy showed up. And Traver starts talking about, his ideas around masculinity, right? The 50s Marlboro man, the sensitive new age guy. Uncivilized wasn't a thing, but it was about how do we take the best of both sides and integrate it into this new modern idea of masculinity. But the guy that showed up didn't really care about men's work. He was a NYPD officer who was like, I just want to lose 50 pounds. And Traver used to own a CrossFit gym and he'd followed him on Instagram during his CrossFit gym ownership times. And so he came and was like, I just want to lose 50 pounds. Can we talk about that? And Traver had this long conversation with the guy and he was like, I can't, my problem is I just can't not go to McDonald's. They have the best coffee and the best breakfast burritos. And Traver, spends an hour with this guy and ultimately it's like, well, stop going to McDonald's getting breakfast burritos and you could probably drop a significant amount of that weight. And so Traver goes back upstairs and sits down and has the conversation following up. And he's like, his buddy that he was living with at the time was like, hey, why don't you eat McDonald's? Like, why don't you do that? Why do we wake up at 5 a.m. to go train? Why do we live in this like Spartan-esque, apartment? We don't drink alcohol. We don't do drugs, any of that kind of stuff. And, Traver just started talking and he would, eventually his buddy took out a camera and Traver was like, I don't eat that. That's civilian food. Like, I'm not trying to live the way the vast majority of people live their lives. Like the civilized world as we know it these days, most of us are on autopilot. Most of us are responding to advertising and marketing and all of these things and making decisions that we're not really conscious about. And so being uncivilized doesn't mean to go be a savage and Viking and live in the woods and rob, rape, and pillage in order to survive. It means to step away from the modern paradigms of masculinity, of the 50s Marlboro man, of the sensitive new age nice guy, but bring the best things that those paradigms had into an integrated form of masculinity, right? So like the 50s Marlboro man, he had discipline, he had stick-to-itiveness. He had, he was capable in a lot of ways. The new age nice guy, if you will, he's sensitive, he's empathetic, he's a good communicator, but there's shadow sides or dark sides to both paradigms. And so how do we take the good things from each of them and become uncivilized, where I now am thinking consciously about my actions, about my behavior patterns, about my life experiences, all of those kinds of things. And so hopefully that helps the woman that, if she's listening later, understand a little bit better why we're called uncivilized versus, being regular civilized human beings or men.
Yeah, it was a better explanation than I gave her. So. Which I did okay with.
I'm sure you did great, man. I'm sure you did great. You've been around a little bit now.
Well, while we're on that, I had a different woman say something to me one day. I was talking about being a part of men's groups, and she was a little frustrated with me about a conversation we were having, and she was like, instead of spending all this time in your men's groups, why don't you just listen to women? And I thought, that's a fair thing. Listening to women is obviously very important to understanding their experience. But tell me, what are we in Uncivilized doing for the world of women?
I think that the best way that we can make women feel safe, seen, heard, and valued is to work through our own stuff first. And that's not to say that their experiences and their stuff is any less important, but we have to be able to get in touch with ourselves and understand our experience, which we haven't really had the space to previously because of those different behavior patterns and paradigms of masculinity in the past. And so right now we need to find ways to get back in touch with ourselves, because if we can't be in relationship with ourselves, we can't be in an effective relationship with our partners, with other women around us. Mm-hmm. A lot of what we do is around, building emotional intelligence and building emotional capacity and resilience and all those kinds of things. And all of those things, the goal is that it trickles over and it impacts the rest of the world around us. We want to end the suffering in men to end the suffering caused by men. And so we have to address it at the root first with men. And then we want the benefits of that work to flow towards women. One of our other tenets in the Uncivilized ethos is to honor the women who bore you and the children who will inherit your earth. And so by all of us getting the opportunity to do this work, we get to have a bigger impact on the world around us, in my opinion.
And, men are generally the purveyors of violence in the world. Women are much less violent in general. And a lot of the violence that men do on the world is to women. Mm-hmm. And so if we can heal those men and have them control themselves and work through all those issues, violence against women would be dramatically increased. So I just thought that was important because, it's not like we're running off and huddling together and just like drinking beer and having a good time. We're doing the work and we're doing it to make the world a better place and a safer place. Yeah.
No, that's another Uncivilized ethos tenet, is to be dangerous, but not a danger. Mm-hmm. Like, we want men to be strong. We want men to be competent. Like, the man who is not skilled in the application of violence is more dangerous than the man that is skilled in the application of violence, because that man doesn't know when to stop. Mm-hmm. That man doesn't know how to control it. That's the man who gets kicked out of the club at night, who's drunk, who rips his shirt off and tries to fight the bouncer because he thinks he's somebody special, right? Like, mm-hmm. The men that do the work emotionally and physically and know how to process all of that are so much safer, so much healthier, so much happier, so much better partners, so much better employees. Insert label here. Like, this work doesn't just affect the man and his heart and his head. Like, it spreads out, because every man that I talk to or comes to our retreat leaves a different person. Like, and that's the goal of any self-development retreat. But what we really want is for them to go out and then be that beacon of safety, be that beacon of masculinity, a positive masculinity out in the world.
That's great. Tell us a little bit more about all of the offerings that Uncivilized. We talked a little bit. We have the Nation, the mm-hmm. online and in-person community. Tell us everything else that's available.
Yeah. So, like, a little bit more about the Nation. It's we have a couple of men's groups that are here in the Front Range, one in Colorado Springs, one here in South Metro area, one in Denver proper. And those groups get together in person 1 to 2 times a month. They have discussions. They go to do fun things. Sometimes, like in December here in Denver, we went and played Nerf archery dodgeball up in Arvada. If you haven't done that yet, I would highly recommend taking the kids to go do that. Whoever's listening out there, it's a blast. But throughout the month, we have lots of different calls that guys can get on and meet men from all over the world who are trying to do the work together. We do online courses for leadership development. I run a 6-week leadership program called the Uncivilized Leadership Crucible, where I bring a lot of things from my personal experience in leadership, whether it was military or in first responder world, but also I tie it all into positive psychology and ways that you can use your own strengths to become the best version of you and the best leader that you can be. We have our men's initiation retreat, which is myself, Traver Boehm, the founder of Uncivilized, and then Dewey Freeman, Michael Gay, and we spend 5 days with somewhere between 20 and 30 men, depending on how many people register, up at a massive house in Jefferson, down in South Park, and we do some really, really deep work with the men. We dive into old stories and narratives and deep into traumas. And there are places that men need to go that they can't go without the support of other men. And we've been running these now for 4.5 years, and the levels of stuff that we get to with the support of a group of men there. I've been doing therapy a long time, and I've done a lot of good work in therapy, but as a former participant in retreats, like I went to places personally that I would have never touched in a decade of therapy because I had the support of men around me. We also spent a day at Happy Dog Ranch down in Sedalia and do a day full of equine therapy assisted work with Dewey at the helm. He's been teaching, working with horses probably longer than most people listening to the podcast today have been alive. But we also, this year we're launching our first father-son initiation retreat, which we're really, really excited about. We're building some teen programs for young men, for teen men. We run a veterans and first responders retreat. The same process with our men's initiation retreat, but just for vets and first responders. And that's hosted by myself. And then 2 other former, one's a current Santa Barbara County, California Sheriff's deputy. And then the other is a former firefighter, dispatcher, and police officer in Ohio. And so we find it really important to bring those communities together in a closed container with just them so that they can feel safe to say the things and see about the things that they've seen in life and experiences they've had without having to worry about being judged by, our traditional civilian, not our uncivilized versus civilized, debate there, but somebody who hasn't served. And so we've got those programs. This month we're bringing therapists from all over the continent here to Golden and training them. Dewey and Traver are training them in how to best work with men. There's been a lot of research over the last few years that the current models for therapy just aren't working for men. And so we're going to take Dewey's 50 plus years of experience, Traver's 10 plus years worth of experience working specifically with men, and help train therapists and coaches in better practices and better ways to connect and to lead men through therapeutic and coaching practices. But there's a whole bunch of other things we do all the time too. We've got in-person workshop, 1-day workshops that are led by our coaches team. We have a team of men's coaches that we've trained and we've worked with over the years that work one-on-one with men. We have physical fitness programming and nutrition programming options for men. And hopefully in the next year or so, we're going to have our own therapy program just for men, ran by men.
And so an important distinction that actually I think you and Traver made at a recent workshop when I was at with you guys was personal growth and development is different than men's work.
Yes.
Tell me why.
So personal growth and development is great. And the problem with I see in a lot of men's work organizations is that they're taking the Tony Robbins, insert professional coach, the Matthew McConaughey is out there. They're taking it and they're taking their material and then just rebranding and repackaging it and saying, I'm a men's coach. But there's, as we've talked about today, there's so many more difficult intricacies that men have faced that are outside the purview of traditional self-development, right? We need to address the safety issues. We need to address the physical issues. We need to address the spiritual issues. We need to address sexual trauma and shame around sex and all those kinds of things that the vast majority of the personal development or self-development community is trying to put a Band-Aid over or ignores completely. And we have to teach men how to feel safe with other men. And we can't do that if we just call ourselves a professional development organization or a personal development organization. We are a men's development organization. And so we have to really focus on those men's specific issues.
Yeah. When I often, I invite a lot of men to my men's groups, and so many of them will text me something like, I'm so glad you're doing this. Thanks so much for the invitation. I don't feel like it's for me right now.
Yeah.
Or I will have their wives will tell me like, keep inviting him. He's just nervous about it. He feels like he's not, ready or whatever. And I know so many men are just like, they're afraid to show up to a group of men. And I think that they, a lot of cases, I run a pretty casual night and you're able to open up however you want to, as deep or as little as you want to. You can just come and experience and listen. But I think these men are afraid that we're going to bring them in, tie them down, and like poke them until they tell us, their deepest, darkest woundings in front of this group they've never known.
Yeah.
What would you say to a guy who's afraid to get into the mix for whatever reason?
At least in Uncivilized, this isn't like Fight Club. Like you don't have, if in Fight Club, if it's your first night, you have to fight, right? Like if it's your first night at an Uncivilized men's group, like you don't have to fight. You don't have to talk. You don't have to do anything if you don't want to. You can sit in the corner and sip on your soda water and eat an apple or a cookie that somebody else brought and just exist, just be there. Like we have men that have come to our groups that don't talk for multiple meetings. And that's perfectly okay. And what they need, what those men need in those moments is I need to feel safe. I need to know that this group of men has my back, because at some point, they're back to those protective factors. At some point, that man didn't feel safe because of an experience he had with another man. And so he needs to feel safe, and then he needs to feel the pull and the permission from other men to get in the ring, if we want to stick with the Fight Club reference. Not that you have to fight.
Right.
There are some organizations out there that do that, but we don't do that. Trevor and I are both former mixed martial arts fighters. And so we know what that's like, and we don't want to ever put anybody in that situation that's not ready for it and doesn't consciously choose that.
You don't have to fight, and you don't have to share your deep dark secrets the first time you show up.
No. Yeah. And it can just be fun. Like we have structure, we have prompts, all that kind of stuff. But, first and foremost, it's about men supporting each other. Through good times, through bad times. Mm-hmm. It's not as scary as you think. But I also think there's a lot of men out there that have seen, the historical, like, oh, let's go, get naked in the woods and beat on drums and, think that that's men's work. Like, yeah, there are men that do that in their men's groups, but that's their decision. That's what they choose to do. That's not what we program for our men in our communities all across the world.
Awesome. I do have this vision I always think of that, one day Uncivilized will be, have so many members, and kind of like in Fight Club, right? when Edward Norton's character is traveling around the world and he sees these guys around the country with black eyes, and they're like, "What's up, bro?"
Yeah.
And just like to have that though, but to be out there, because we're not fighting, we're doing self work, but to walk around a city and see other men who are in this work and be like, "Oh, you're in Uncivilized? I'm in Uncivilized." And it would just, to know that other men out there are doing this work has me feel like I'm safe. Like when I just think of my core group of guys and know that they're going through the same struggles, I feel just safe in knowing that they're out there struggling with me.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's really cool.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, man.
Well, a little bit more. That was a great talk about men's work. Tell me, what do you do for fun? What's your family like?
My family's busy. Like I said, an 11-year-old, a 6-year-old, both of them play lacrosse in Parker and Castle Rock. I play lacrosse here in Highlands Ranch and in Littleton as well. Been playing for a long time. Snowboard, mountain bike. We're pretty typical Colorado people now that we're out here. We've assimilated quite well. But I also coach CrossFit. I run the CrossFit Teens program down at CrossFit Loop in Castle Rock. Been doing that for about 6 months. Been a CrossFit coach for about 8.5 years now. So we're teaching my wife to snowboard. That's probably our biggest challenge right now. Slowly but surely. But yeah, we're, a couple of big old German shepherds in the backyard. And, that's pretty much us in a nutshell, man.
Very cool. Oh, back into it for a minute. So Uncivilized is now sort of forming a partnership with Douglas County.
Yes.
Which is what really made me excited. I wanted to find a way to loop you in. This is a Highlands Ranch podcast. You're in Parker. Parker's like a cousin, I feel like. But really, I was like, okay, Douglas County, that's us. So tell us about the partnership that's coming up with Uncivilized and Douglas County.
Yeah, so we're in the very beginning stages of all of this. Douglas County had some grant money that they received over the last couple of years for some mental health initiatives, and they set aside a large chunk of money for men specifically. And men lead in almost every negative health statistic you can imagine, other than Alzheimer's disease. The top 10 early killers of men, or of people in the United States, we lead 9 out of 10 of them. And that's heart attacks and strokes and suicide and all of those kinds of things. And Douglas County Public Health has recognized that. And so they've set aside a good amount of money. They're conducting a bunch of research right now so that we can meet the needs of the men here in Douglas County. But our goal by the end of 2024 is hopefully to have an uncivilized men's group in every municipality in Douglas County. We're going to spend some time doing leadership development and training and, mental health first responder training for these small group leaders. Same thing, provide them content, curriculum support. But the goal is to have, Franktown, Castle Rock, Larkspur, Sedalia, Highlands Ranch, Parker have one in every community by the end of 2024, as long as things go well. So if you're out there, you like hearing that, contact the public health department and let them know that you support the initiative between Uncivilized and public health.
Awesome. I'm sure, the more we get people into our groups, they're going to know. So dibs on Highlands Ranch.
Yeah.
Well, I got a few questions that I like to ask all my guests.
Yeah.
And one of them is, what's one connection you need in the world right now? Whether that's professional, some kind of friendship, anything for your family. What do you need right now?
We need a lawyer who is very familiar with starting up a nonprofit. Here at Uncivilized, we are working this year very hard to establish a nonprofit wing for what we do so that we can better support underserved and disadvantaged communities, to support programs in schools, and to support our vets and first responders programs. So if anybody knows a good nonprofit lawyer who works for a pretty reliable rate, would definitely love to be put in touch with them.
Awesome. What's a good email that someone could get in touch with you for that?
Yeah, it's dave@manuncivilized.com.
Awesome. Or shoot me at info@highlandsranchpodcast.com. I'll get you connected. What's the book that you've read that's been most impactful in your life?
That's a really good question. I'm going to go with To Be a Man by Dr. Robert Masters. It's a book all about masculinity, but it drastically changed the way that I look at men and men's development from childhood into adulthood. And a close second to that would be Iron John.
Awesome. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Take care of yourself first. Because if you're not taking care of yourself first, you can't take care of anybody else.
I'm reminded of that every day with my two. We just had a brand new daughter 11 weeks ago. Yeah. And man, it is, I've figured out I have to wake up at 5 a.m. if I'm going to care for myself. And I am a much better husband and father if I can pull that off.
Yes.
So important. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then tell us one more time where guys can find out more about Uncivilized and join a group, join the nation.
Yeah, definitely. So you can find us at www.manuncivilized.com/the nation. If you're interested in finding becoming part of the online community or finding a group, just manuncivilized.com. If you want to learn more about us as an organization in general. Also, you can follow Traver at Traver Boehm, TraverBoehm, and then myself at uncivilized_Dave on Instagram, or you can find us on LinkedIn at Uncivilized Inc. or on Instagram for our at Uncivilized_official to keep up with all the opportunities coming up here in the local area soon.
Awesome. And starting in March, we'll be having a Man Uncivilized chapter in Highlands Ranch, and hope to see you guys there. Dave, thanks so much for your time today, man. I really appreciate you coming and introducing Uncivilized to Highlands Ranch. And I'm so excited to keep growing this whole thing with you and be a part of what you guys are creating.
Thanks, man. We couldn't do it without guys like you. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. All right.
Appreciate you.